All right, everyone, welcome back. So we are going to be getting into our first panel discussion. This one is about navigating First Amendment audits. We have as moderator today Kara Sheets. Thank you, Kara. And she's joined today by two panelists, Bill Cole, he's with Berkeley Public, and then Ann Tran, she's with San Jose Public. Thank you very much.
So, hello everybody. I wanted to start with a quick show of hands. We're talking about First Amendment audits. And who here is familiar with what a First Amendment audit is? Just raise your hand. Many folks. Wonderful. So, First Amendment audits, just to summarize, are individuals' attempts to catch government employees violating their First Amendment rights by inciting them to deny their constitutional right to film or photograph in a public space, such as a library. So just another show of hands, who here feels prepared to encounter a First Amendment auditor? Some of you, but not all of you. So Bill and Ann have both had experience with First Amendment auditors firsthand from different sides of the experience. So I just want to ask you guys first to start off, what is it that First Amendment auditors are trying to accomplish? Yeah, Bill, why don't you go ahead and start?
I'll go first. They're trying to get a rise out of you more than anything. They would really like for you to react to them emotionally, tell them to leave, tell them all the stuff that they can't do, and then call the police. I would recommend not doing any of that. Sometimes the police will be necessary, and I think Ann can speak to that better, but really they're trying to provoke some sort of outsized reaction from you as a public employee. And what they would really like to do is get your security staff, if you have any, all riled up. And we'll see evidence of that soon.
I think the only thing that I would add to that is that sometimes they test your patience a lot. Not only yours, but also the patience of the patrons or the children in the room, and that's our biggest concern at San Jose Public, and I hope that we could have like a discussion on what's the best way, because I don't think there is really a single best way to respond, and I think the auditors have different personalities too.
So what was your experience, Bill, with a First Amendment auditor?
It was a hoot. So I manage the Central Library at Berkeley Public, which is a large urban location. And should I just show a clip?
Sure.
Let me show a clip. I got a couple of clips. Nope, that's not the one that I want. How about this one? Here we go. So, to set the scene, this individual, George, we're like tight now. He came in filming. He walked in filming with his stick and his phone on there, and immediately provoked an altercation with another patron. And then he wanted security to respond to that altercation because they were going to fight, and they said spicy words at each other. And he wanted security to call the cops on this other patron.
Watch me what? You watched me what? You said you were here yesterday for the same guy, even though this is my first time in Berkeley, California?
That's a lie.
So we're gonna have to find out, what is this guy doing? What is this guy doing?
I want you to get a good picture.
Yeah? You got a good picture? Got a good picture?
Yeah.
So it's part of your policy to identify, ma'am. Allied Universal?
What's happening?
He's taking pictures of people, staff,
Yep.
patrons.
Okay. Yeah.
You tell him you can't take pictures of people.
He actually can.
Place he can.
Yeah.
He can
No,
take it better.
it's a public space, and he has the right to.
Well, they're already calling the police.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Bill.
Hi, Bill. I'm George.
George.
Nice to meet you.
I'm the Central Library Services Manager. Is there
Perfect.
something I can help you with? Or?
Yeah, first things first. I walked in peacefully, minding my own business. I was threatened by. Watch me what? You watched me
So
what?
there were some falsehoods in George's statements there. He didn't walk in peacefully. He walked in antagonistically. And he also was not live streaming this. He was representing that he was live streaming it, and that people in the chat were giving him feedback. Not true. So he claimed that somebody in the chat had looked up Allied Security's policy. Also not true, because their policy is that the guards don't have to give their names. And we'll get into like who has to identify themselves in what way. So there were some challenges in that interaction because staff wasn't quite sure what he could and couldn't do and how they were supposed to respond to that. So security was a little bit at sea. Our staff person, Sam, was a little bit at sea. But he stayed nice and calm, which I thought was good. And I don't know, at one point in there was somebody there's a voice in the background that said, "Is Bill there?" Because they called me, and then I came out, which I thought was an excellent response to, I'm not sure what to do here. So then I went out there and faked it. And I think that's enough video for now. I can, yeah, that's good enough for video, I think. Let's chat.
Yeah, so how does policy come into play when a First Amendment auditor walks into a library?
I would say for us in San Jose, the thing that we reckon with is that we've explained to our staff that we are a limited public forum. And for us, consent is part of our policy. So we have a behavioral policy that, advises against, or that limits the ability for anyone to photograph and film without consent. And structurally, how we enforce that policy is through, suspensions and things like that. So for our staff, the advice is explicitly tell, the First Amendment auditor, I do not consent to being photographed and filmed. And that usually is a more antagonistic way of greeting them, right? And that pretty much sets the first trigger as to how we either escalate or de-escalate depending on who we're dealing with and which auditor comes through our doors. But it's structured around the behavior policy, and we have a privacy policy too that is central around consent.
So can you clarify, was that a pre-existing policy or was it a reaction to First Amendment audits?
Luckily, it was pre-existing, so it's been in place since we had surveillance cameras put in, and it really helped us frame around, filming and protecting our patrons' privacy and the things that they view in our spaces.
And so for libraries that don't have this explicitly written into their patron conduct policies or their behavior policies, maybe Bill, you can speak to this. At what point does the First Amendment right of an auditor cross the line with library behavior policy or a patron conduct policy?
Sure. So this might come as a surprise to some of you, but in Berkeley we do things a little differently. And we actually do have a policy that people can't film in the library, but there is some question as to the legality of that policy, and probably a lot of you are in a situation that is similar to that, where it's stated in your policy you have to have permission to film, but the city of Berkeley does not really support that. They say, you're in a public space, it's a limited public forum, we cannot really support a rule that's not legal. And the same is true with the whole filming children or taking pictures of children thing. It's like they're at the park. You could take a picture of them. We're in this gray area, and probably a lot of you are too, where it's in the policy, we can't really enforce it, and now what do we do? And what we do is react rather than have a really great plan stated ahead of time. So what we didn't see in the video, and I'll share a link to the whole thing if you want to go through the whole gory details of all of my interaction with George. But I sort of placated him a little bit, tried to get him a library card unsuccessfully, and then highlighted some of the architectural features of the building because that was his stated interest. Also not true. And then he went one way, and I ran through the rest of the building and went to every public service point that we have and talked to the staff at each spot and let them know that he was coming and what was within their realm of sort of response. And to kind of get to, I think, what you were getting at, Cara, is we have an obligation to tell them who we are. So I told people, if he asks you what your name is, tell him your name. You can just give him your first name, and that's fine. If he wants contact information, you give him the main line, 6100. He can call and go through our phone tree. Won't that be fun? And then you can offer him library service, and if he sticks his camera in your face and makes you uncomfortable, you can walk away. So the dividing line for us is once staff goes into a staff-only space, George can't follow. And I made it very clear to staff, I don't care if you abandon the desk. If you don't want to be part of that interaction, you go in the back of house, maybe let somebody know, that would be helpful, because then I can go out there and manage George. But you don't have to sit there and suffer through that. So I don't know, I feel like that's a good course of action. It gives staff an out without breaking the law.
Right, so then it would be advisable if it hasn't happened already in your libraries to very clearly mark employee-only areas. Is that something that you guys have both undertaken in your systems?
Yeah, we already pretty much had that
Yeah.
for the most part.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, Anne, I know that your situation is a little bit different at San Jose Public Library in that you have this pre-existing no-film policy, as well as you guys have your own security in-house. How does that sort of assist or hinder when dealing with First Amendment auditors?
So for our system, we were fortunate enough to have a hybrid model. I know that not every system can have a hybrid model, but we were able to basically split our security coverage for the branches that have severe, high-risk incidents. We place contract security most of the days at those branches, and then we also have in-house capacity. So we hire senior security officers, and we train them through our standard operating procedure, let them learn and train with PD on all of our behavior policies and enforcements, and then they split up the same geographical division, if you will, with San Jose PD's beat map. So they have that integration with San Jose Police Department. And the contract security helps in some ways as a deterrence, if you know, it's a visible deterrence, and then our in-house security would often complement their security posture with, enforcing suspensions, asking people to leave, and coordinating that notification to PD and being there for our staff if PD decides to show up and take reports and those kinds of things. And it's a strange model, but it's helped us a lot in terms of triage, preventative, and then being able to ensure that we have that coverage and that knowledge in-house, so that as contract security experiences high rates of turnover, our in-house security can then train and brief them for the new oncoming batch.
And so, Bill, have you ever had to call the police on a patron?
Oh.
Just in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine a lot of you here have experienced that in some capacity. With First Amendment audits, though, I think it's safe to say that the goal is not to have to involve police or security, and that we want frontline staff to be empowered and prepared to disempower this auditor by what? What would you guys say is the best approach to dealing with an auditor?
Killing them with kindness. That's what worked for me in my George situation, where I acted like I was excited for him to be there. We talked about some of the features of the library. I directed him to some of the cool architectural aspects of the building, because that's, again, what he said. He acted like, first time in Berkeley, thought the building looked cool, which it does from the outside, and he wanted to check out the architecture. He was at City Hall the day before, so it wasn't his first time in Berkeley. And that kind of gets to a point that it was unfortunate that City Hall didn't let us know that he had hit them already, because forewarned is forearmed, and I think we might have been better prepared for that interaction had we known. And so I would urge those of you who are in a position to interact with your larger municipality to have that conversation ahead of time. Hey, if they hit one of us, they're probably going to hit more of us, so we should all kind of be working from the same playbook and have a similar approach. And yeah, so the scampering around the building and prepping staff ahead of time was, I thought, beneficial, but didn't need to happen if we had been a little bit more prepared.
I like Berkeley. We told our staff we operated a little bit differently when we were first notified of a First Amendment audit. It was not a peaceful tour of the building. It was actually more contentious. The person came in, asked for support with making a library card, and then proceeded to accuse our staff of discriminating against their disability. And then it got more contentious as he started following female staff around with a camera, started going up to patrons with a camera, and then calling them names, and then filming the inside of our staff room. So unfortunately, we did have to call our security team and police. And luckily for us, we were able to have a very frank conversation with our city attorney's office and the police department. And basically, it's one thing to let them not get a rile out of you. It's another thing for junior staff clerks, especially the ones that work on the weekends, to have to deal with this constant borderline harassment behavior from the First Amendment auditor that showed up in our branches. And we gave them guidance that they can leave the library, let them, or leave the floor, go into the back room and notify the branch manager and call our security team so that we can go and take that pressure off the staff. Luckily for us, we have a municipal code that enforces trespassing a little bit more strictly, and we got agreement from the district attorney's office that should things escalate, it never really stops with just filming, right? It's harassing staff, following them, continuing to film them, badger them, and test their patience. And this is what children are running around watching, and it just creates this uncomfortable environment for everyone. And so, unfortunately, we did have to call police twice, and police officers did show up, and the conversation shifted from, can this person come back to the library? What suspension protocol are we following here? And we've advised our staff that it's trespassing because we've asked them to stop and they wouldn't. But it also, we had to do a training with our staff and what clear things needs to be relayed to the operator, the 911 operator when they call. Is this person following you? Is the camera up in your face? Like, these are things that the officers need to know ahead of time so that they can respond appropriately. And so it's a different take than the peaceful resolution that Berkeley's been able to do with their First Amendment auditor, but it really just depends on who shows up at your branch. And we've been unfortunate enough to experience like the more aggressive ones. And when the videos show up on YouTube, we actually had a librarian get to the point where he followed the staff outside, followed the auditor outside and read out his number and his name. And he made the video made some rounds, through whatever channels the First Amendment auditors share. And we started getting threats and calls. And we had to work internally, thank goodness, for our security team to field all of those and relay that to police, because our librarian was African American, and we started fielding a lot of racist and very mean, scary comments because they knew who to call.
So I just want to jump in here. We do have rules in Berkeley. They're like some of what you were talking about, Anne, is where we would start to draw lines. Okay, you're following a staff person or another patron around in the library. Now you're interfering with their comfort or safety, and we have a rule for that, and we will enforce that. So had that occurred, that's where we would have started to get into our rules of use policy and enforcing that. He didn't do that with us, but in a different scenario, we would have had a different approach for sure. Also, I made perhaps a grave error in handing him my business card, which he then filmed. So now the trolls have called my office with some really colorful language and racist commentary about our security guards, and that was awesome. I didn't bring those audio clips for you because I don't think you want to hear them, but yeah, that's certainly an issue. I mean, I don't really care. I find them somewhat amusing because they're just so off base and ridiculous. But yeah, the harassment aspect, they know where we work. They could just show up again, and that's a concern.
So that's where it kind of starts to gray the line with behavior policy. That's where the First Amendment rights are sort of sunsetting in a way, and harassing behavior is now in violation of your policy. So in terms of preparing staff and preparing your system for something like this, it sounds like having a really clear understanding of your policies, not just your local institution policies, but local laws in regards to harassing behavior. And did you have to coordinate with the city attorney at all in dealing with the harassing behavior of the auditor?
Yes, and part of that is that when we call police, depending on the officer, some know the trespass policy at SJ Public very well, some don't. And then it also helps us have this conversation about what happens when it goes beyond trespassing? What if this person goes back? When we suspend somebody from the one branch, they're suspended from all 25 of our branches. How do we keep that consistent and that notification across the system? How do we enforce that? And we really rely on, the core memory of our in-house security officers to do that. But in terms of enforcing it, the duration of how long they are suspended works in our favor, because once our staff makes that justification, then we can say it's not only trespassing, it's harassment, it's verbal abuse of our staff, it's, police has been able to uphold, assault and battery just because of the proximity of the camera to our staff's faces. So those things help. It helps us reinforce, and usually it takes the wind out of the person for a while, but internally, we have to constantly reiterate the training. And our staff really benefit from training on what they should say to the operator, because sometimes things come off as not as bad, and sometimes it's really bad and police to show up and it's not that bad. So it's a constant marriage between training police, working with our district attorney, and upholding the municipal codes that apply. So it starts with trespassing, but there's other penal codes for, assault, battery, stalking, defining harassment. And we rely on the police department's training to their officers when they show up, that these are the things that would apply so that they won't have to ask our librarians what penal codes do you think applies here.
Yeah, don't ever call the police and say there's a guy filming in the library. They're not really going to respond to that. If you call them and say there's a person here who is in violation of our rules, he's harassing people, he's making people feel unsafe, now you get a response from PD. But filming is not going to get a rise out of them, probably. And I think, no?
Well, we're nearing the end of our time because we want to have time for questions from you all. But just to sort of summarize, Bill, I want to bring it back to your comment about having the main line to hand out to people, especially in light of the fact that one of their go-to seems to be, once they come in and film, they're posting their videos wherever they're posting them, and then there's continuing harassment from others. So, as civic employees, we give our names, but you don't have to give your direct line. You can just give the general line. Do you have any other summary advice for folks about preparing staff, especially frontline staff?
I would say keep it really simple. Think like 2 or 3 things that they can remember. This is how I should respond, and get a manager or an administrator involved as quickly as possible when you have one of those. Even if the person is just walking around filming and not violating other aspects of your rules of use, probably your manager and or other administrator wants to know that that person's in the building and would like to come out and help to manage the situation.
And the only thing I would add is ask your staff to not follow that person outside.
Yeah, don't ever do that.
Good advice.
That's a good rule.
Okay. So I think we have time for questions, if anyone has any questions.
Hi there. So my question is actually around your volunteers that are in the library at the same time that an First Amendment auditor comes through. How have you either prepped or trained your volunteers in their response also in the space?
For us, we rely on our security team to do touch point training. So every time that there is a call for, a seat or a disturbance, our security tries to get there in time. And then we do trainings with the branch manager. So this happens, these are the talking points that we want our staff to relay, including volunteers. We don't separate the volunteers from the staff. They're included in part of how we think around policy and enforcement. So we do those touch point trainings, and usually I have my security team follow up within a day at that branch and do that kind of scenario-based training, if you will, at the branch so that our junior staff knows what to do. That includes the volunteers.
Yeah, so the rebooted post-pandemic Berkeley Public Library volunteer program coming soon. Watch the space. But I think that our direction in general for volunteers is if you encounter an interaction in the stacks or out in the wild that you don't feel prepared for or uncomfortable with, refer that to the staff. Take it back to the desk. Divert them back to people who have been trained, because sometimes the volunteers are really just there to kind of pull your router or shelve stuff or what have you, and you wouldn't want to rely on them to be the responder to that sort of a situation.
Hi, I'm over here. Thank y'all for being here this morning and for sharing. Oh, there we go. Thanks, guys. Have you found any kind of formal or informal ways to support staff who have had kind of a traumatic encounter with these auditors? to kind of help them feel safe in the library again, or, how to manage dealing with trolls who have their, contact information at work or things like that?
My approach to the trolls has been sharing these voicemails with my coworkers and having a sort of a laugh about it. But that's not really the response that staff needs. I've only done this once, so Anne probably has better information about the sort of aftermath, because I kind of picked this off so that staff didn't get traumatized.
I would say, for our system, we rely on our operations unit relies on the public services, so the librarians and their division managers to support us, right? So we always have that continuous feedback loop. And so when there is a traumatic incident, not just First Amendment auditors, assault in our libraries, those kinds of things, I rely on my counterparts and the division managers in public services to work with the branch managers and really follow up with staff on what employee assistance benefits would be available to the staff. We notify our HR department and basically say, like, these are all the resources that you can get help. Don't rush back, and we work with each staff on an individual basis to make sure that by the time that they get back to the branch, they're comfortable, and if not, we have continuous check-ins. And then really, luckily for our security team, our staff find a lot of comfort in how often they visit and how often they check in. And we started off the year with 2.5 full-time employees. We're going to 10. So the idea is that by the time that 6 months from now turns around, we would have 10 fully trained, fully integrated in-house security staff that can spend at least 2 hours, at a branch, working with the staff, being part of the team, and really knowing the community.
And I think that like incident response and aftermath, one of the things that staff seems to really appreciate is having an opportunity to share with their coworkers. I think this would be a perfect sort of conversation for a staff meeting, like a small team meeting, and you could have multiple small team meetings where you talk about, here's what happened, here's how it went, here's how we could do that differently next time, or like nailed it, right? Maybe ideally that would be great. And then I know that staff feels safer in the space when they feel supported by other staff. So there's a kind of a rallying point there. I think that would be a good approach.
So our city attorney has given us a little bit of guidance on how to handle these First Amendment audits in regards to the California state laws protecting patron privacy. So for instance, reference transactions that might be being filmed, self-checkout use where displays of what they're checking out is popping up. What have you guys done, or what advice have your city attorneys given you in that regard?
Along the same lines, for us, it's really we use the patron privacy, the state's patron privacy guidance or regulations as what is consent and what is not, right? So if that person goes up to a patron who's reading a book and films, and that patron says, yeah, you can film me, then obviously we're not gonna tell our staff to follow this person around, unless, there's other people out there that says, no, I don't consent. And so we advise our staff to have that conversation up front with each other, and then if that person goes through, we tell our staff to just notify the branch manager so that they can help us. The district attorney, our district attorney's office, basically said it's more enforceable to make that justification for trespassing. And we have a muni code in San Jose that is a little bit more strict than, trespass violations, and that's when you get down to the enforcement side. It's what we tell our staff that, that person is suspended, we'll follow that route, and it's usually around how to keep this person from coming back to the branch, unfortunately. But we have a re-entry process where we can reintegrate them later.
We haven't gotten really any more guidance than kind of what I already shared with staff, which is if he asks for your name, you have to give it. If he asks for contact information, you have to give it. And then you don't have to stay there and continue to engage with that behavior. Yeah, so we didn't get a ton of additional information from our city manager, but we did get that. So we sort of supplemented that with our responses. Yeah.
I would like more clarity on the law and policy and how they interact. To my understanding, a person can't be trespassed from public property unless they are doing something illegal, something that is against policy, maybe not so much. Also, what is the expectation of privacy in public? I mean, we have people watching porn on computers in our libraries where children abound. And so however you may feel about First Amendment auditors, however anybody may feel about them, is what they're doing legal? Do they have the right to film in public? Do they need a person's consent? Does the person have the right to expect privacy or expect not to be filmed? You can't trespass a person's eyes. And so I think we need to know what the legal parameters are and have a uniform policy. Our mission statement says that we're dedicated to providing access to information, education, and the joy of reading. I'm sure their statement is something like they want to provide access and make sure everybody's First Amendment rights are enforced and are respected. So I just feel like it doesn't have to be antagonistic, and we need to know exactly what policies are, what the laws are, and what people can and cannot do. And that's what's going to help us to face the public with good information and be good citizens.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that that's the reason that we have had to take sort of a light touch approach, and that's why we weren't. I mean, once we clarified what he could and couldn't do in my interaction, he wandered around the library for a good 20 minutes, maybe longer, filming the whole time, and we didn't stop him from doing that because that was his right. Honestly, I don't think George is a very good First Amendment auditor. He didn't do a great job. He could have gotten like a lot more of a rise out of us by doing things like filming people using the self-check or filming them reading a book where it gets a little blurry there, right? He did go around behind the staff service point, which is not a great design of a service point, but that's a different conversation. And he was filming over their shoulders to their computer screens. Now, potentially, if private patron information had been on there, we would want to curtail that, right? He doesn't have a right to film that. Which is why we need to work on that service point. Right. So,
Well, I would say, if I could just jump in, I think you really hit the nail on the head with your comment. I mean, that's exactly it. That's the essence of what we're getting at, is that you need to know your local policy, you need to know the law for the state of California and for your ordinance, for your city, and be prepared ahead of time for exactly what a First Amendment auditor can and cannot do. I mean, generally speaking, they do have a right to film and photograph in a public space, and all of us as the public, not as staff, you know, if you're there in the public, you do not have a reasonable expectation to privacy in a public space. However, you as a public citizen can say, I do not consent to being filmed, and that's between you and the First Amendment auditor. As staff, we shouldn't be stepping into that interaction. As staff, we don't have that reasonable right to privacy in the workplace, and that's why we can be filmed, but our patrons have the right to ask not to be. Yeah.
They have the right to ask not to be, but I don't think they have the right to have that enforced. I mean, I think we need.
We need a mic.
This is why I'm saying I think we doesn't mean the person has to stop filming them. Now, they may not be able to use it commercially, but then maybe they can just stick it on the internet on YouTube. But, you know, how we feel about it is not really that relevant.
The point, right?
No,
What
it's
we
true.
need to know what the laws are, because I wouldn't like somebody just coming up and filming me. I would walk away if I could. If I'm on the job, I'm just gonna keep doing my job and try not to get a rise, you know, get them upset. But do they have the right to keep doing that? They're in a public place that they pay taxes for, and I believe they do, but I'm not sure. I really think we need some serious advice on it.
And I think what we've been telling our staff too is that, like, can you imagine having this conversation explaining the laws and policies that are in place to somebody that is either antagonizing or just, you know, asking for that constant attention feedback. So we've advised our staff to like just print out the policies that we have. This is the behavior policy, this is the media policy that pertains to the city of San Jose. And then we also ask them to post, you know, no filming without consent. And really that consent piece is what anchors our response or lack of thereof. And it helps curtail it to some extent, but you're right, like we don't have, you know, clearly stated California or federal policies around filming. And the definition of public spaces, if I were to tell a clerk to define that, a 19-year-old who's, you know, who this is maybe their first job, it would be an impossible ask for them. And that's really where the de-escalation tactics that we rely on our in-house security team comes in, because the conversation doesn't really involve consent anymore. It's just, you know, you're creating an unwelcoming environment. The staff can't do their job, right? There's a policy, and I think there's a penal code on, you know, preventing public employees from conducting their job. And so those are things that we train our system on, is just, can you demonstrate that this is preventing you from conducting your job? Is this person making you fearful? That's where the de-escalation from our security team usually happens. But if we have an antagonistic person that continues to badger, then the enforcement side is really around consent for us. But yeah, we ran into the same issues with talking to our city attorneys on what's applicable. And it's even more frustrating when we leave it to our staff to like define what, you know, penal codes should apply and what shouldn't. And our best way is that we basically sent out a training and FAQ, and like we make sure that it's at the branches. So when they do get badgered or when a First Amendment auditor shows up, everything is in writing. That just cuts down the interaction.
Well, sometimes, thank you for all your questions or answers. Sometimes people, I think, unintentionally or maybe with intention are falling into this bracket, and I'm thinking more specifically with youth. A lot of youth come into the libraries and antagonize or try to provoke, or, you know, for YouTube content, for TikTok content, for fun. And I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit on your experience in those situations, perhaps, and how you might, how you might address items with youth, if that's even come up with you, or if that's something that, you know, is looking to be addressed. And then also, someone just came up in my ear a few minutes ago and mentioned that they would like to see a training video made to widely distribute to help people and clarify some of these answers.
I think the question about the sort of youth, I don't know, what the sort of TikTokification of the library, we would lean into our rules of use in general. Like if you are causing a disturbance in the library in trying to capture your viral video, then we're gonna cut you off there. or if you're interfering with staff or harassing staff in some way, again, we have rules about that, so that's not okay. It's not about the filming, it's about the other behavior that you're exhibiting in conducting that filming. Yeah, I think a training video would be pretty good.
I do want to share, I just stumbled across this, the Michigan Library Association. If you go to their site, they have some really great information specifically about First Amendment auditors, sort of do's and don'ts, including a really helpful illustrated reaction to an auditor that went wrong, and then that same reaction with it going right. So I would suggest you guys search that up for more
Yeah,
info.
and I took the time to go back and look at some of George's other videos, and he got some pretty spicy reactions from different people. So actually watching those other videos could help you feel prepared for your interaction with him.
Well, thank you so much. And they kindly are sharing their contact information, so if you have more specific questions, please do reach out. There we go. If you want to see the full interaction with George, our good friend, you can view it here. But thank you. We're going to take lunch now, so please be back around 1 o'clock. Thank you.